Welcome to another workshop video from Touro University. We're excited to cover today's workshop that's going to cover enhancing your workflow and your students' future. Please welcome Naomi Schlesinger, who will be hosting today's workshop video.
Being able to use AI as part of your daily or weekly productivity makes a world of a difference. And the second part of it is teaching AI to students. And so I spent my thesis project focused on this topic and spent some time teaching AI literacy to my students. And so I'll be sharing that later in the evening. So I'll start off just by sharing a little, some tools that I use on a daily basis, some AI tools. Then we'll go into a test lab where you'll have some time to experiment and work with these tools and ask any questions along the way. And then we'll transition into teaching AI literacy, where I'll share a little bit about the course that I mentioned and how you could integrate teaching AI literacy in your own classrooms. And then finally, we'll end with a Q&A where I'll flip the script onto you and you can ask me any questions that you have. So as she said, my name is Naomi. I'm currently teaching 5th grade social studies and a department head at my school. I currently work at a private school, but before that I was teaching 6th grade social studies at a public school. And I'm a recent graduate of Touro in the instructional technology department. So I understand both ends of the spectrum of being a student and teacher. And during my time at Touro, this was a topic that I dedicated a lot of time towards, which is teaching AI literacy. And during that time, I developed a course, a self-guided course for educators. And then for my thesis project, I designed and developed a course for students. So before we get into it, I have a question for you all, because I would love to hear about what brought you to this workshop today. And so I'd love to hear about if you're using, think about your daily workload, and if AI could take over any task for you, what would it be? And if you are someone that is already currently using AI, I'd love to also hear some ways that you're using AI as well. So if you want to put that into the chat or share out loud, either option works. Gemini and chat. Yeah, Gemini is a big one for me. Do grading. Oh, that is one that I am going to speak about because that is one that I have currently entered into the realm of. And it is making such a difference for my grading. ChatGPT, Gemini, iExcel. Oh, okay. I haven't used iExcel in a while, but Gemini is a big one that I use. All right, well, thank you all for sharing. So AI can do those things, but in order to do those things, you need to give it directions to do that and do it the way that you like. So the biggest problem that I've encountered with AI and that I've heard from other people that are struggling to use it and integrate it into their daily schedule is they're not getting the answers that they want to get. And in order to get the best results, you need to give AI clear, specific instructions. So in order to do that, there's a formula that I like to use, and I don't always go exactly to this script, but it is helpful to have these things incorporated into your prompt because prompt engineering is everything when it comes to getting the results that you want with AI. So in terms of writing your prompt, some things to include is your role. And so that could be a 5th grade teacher. Maybe it's you're creating curriculum. So as a curriculum designer, as a guidance counselor, as an administrator, as a special education teacher, or as an IEP writer. So you want to give it a clear role that it takes on as it's giving you back your response. The task, and this is probably the most important part, is what do you want it to do for you? Are you having it write something, summarize something, generate? So you want to be really specific about the active verbs that you're feeding it. The format. So oftentimes it'll come out just like a bunch of bulleted points. And sometimes I'll want it to be in paragraph form, or I want it to be in a bulleted list or format as a table. So also considering the format that you want to receive. And then finally, the constraints. And this is really important because these are the limitations that you are giving AI when you are giving them the prompt. So maybe you want to differentiate something to a certain grade level, and that could be at a 4th grade level. Maybe you are giving it a certain resource that you want it to create quiz questions around. So using this resource, or giving it a certain list or number of examples or questions to generate. So here are 2 examples. On the left, you could see is a really general, unspecific example of a prompt that you could put into ChatGPT or Gemini or really any type of language model. So on the left is a lesson about the American Revolution. On the right here is a more specific one that incorporates that RFTC formula. Act as a 5th grade history teacher, so you're giving it the role. Create a 45-minute lesson, so you're giving it a time constraint and a specific task about the causes of the American Revolution. And so you're narrowing in on not just the American Revolution, but specifically the causes. And then a breakdown of how to spend the time. A 5-minute warm-up, a 15-minute activity using primary source images, and a 3-question exit ticket. Format this as a simple outline. So AI can be a brilliant tool for you, but it's all about the information that you are giving it. It can be your best teaching assistant, but it needs to be told exactly what to do. Ultimately, you are the driver of the car, and it is doing the driving, well, partially doing the driving for you, but it needs to know exactly where to go and how fast to drive. So a couple tools that, oh my gosh, sorry guys, that I use on a weekly or even daily basis are these 4. So Gemini or ChatGPT, I personally have a preference for Gemini, but they essentially have very similar capabilities. Diffit, this was probably the first tool that I experimented with, and this is great for differentiation. Notebook LM. This is another Google-based tool, and it is an incredible tool for research, but also for turning articles or resources into multimodal resources. And then finally, Brisk. And this is one that I've started to experiment with most recently. And I've been using it for grading and for giving feedback to my students, since this is probably giving feedback on writing assignments is probably one of my most time-consuming tasks as a teacher. And this has saved me so much time in terms of giving feedback. So I'm going to go a little bit into depth into each one, but I just wanted to give you an overview of all of these tools. So the first is Google Gemini. This tool I use every day for literally any task I have, whether it is lesson planning and brainstorming and using it sort of as like a partner where I will ask it questions, I'll give it an idea, and then it'll give me a response or its feedback, or it'll turn it into an engaging assignment. So over here on the bottom, I had an idea for this. I had different resources and I had this idea in my head of what kind of assignment I wanted, but it took all my ideas and my information and it put it into a student-facing document that I ended up using and worked really well with my students. And on the top over here is a rubric. And so I'll often be using it to create rubrics for editing or drafting emails or newsletters to families, to create rubrics, assessments, generating student grouping. So I have an entire document where I've taken notes on all my students, and I have inputted that into Gemini. And now each time I have groups that I need to make for any type of project or collaborative activity, it has a list of those students, and they're able to pair it based upon their academic abilities, their behavioral goals, and also it also remembers and has a history because it holds that data. So I could also ask it for differentiation and no repeats of those groups as well. But there are endless ways to use Gemini. And at the end, I'm going to be sharing a bunch of resources. And one of those is 100 ways to use Gemini in education. And it gives you a ton of different prompts for using Gemini in different ways. The second tool that I use is Diffit. And this tool, like I said, I use to differentiate different resources or articles for my students. So essentially, the way that I use it is I'll find an article that I like, and because I'm teaching ancient histories to students, I'll often find these great resources, but they're really dense and they're not on my students' grade level. And so I'll take that resource, I'll input it into Diffit, and out comes a student-facing, developmentally appropriate document for them to read, along with questions, with key vocabulary, and a summary. So I'm going to be showing you this short demo video from Diffit to show you how this works. And one thing I will say about Diffit is it's a really beginner-friendly tool. So if you are someone who is a little nervous about prompting, you're not quite sure how it works, Diffit really does it all for you. It asks you what grade level you're working with, and what subject area you have. So it really walks you through that process of prompting.
Diffit for teachers. Teachers can put in a topic that they're teaching or use existing content, and Diffit will create student-ready resources in minutes. Here, I've put in the topic carbon cycle. I can choose the language that I want the resources in or the reading level. Let's go ahead and select 5th grade and select generate resources. Just by putting in carbon cycle, selecting a language and a grade level, I've now got a reading passage where I can select and see the sources that it used to create the reading, a vocabulary list, multiple choice questions, short answer questions, a think, pair, share for students to complete with an open-ended prompt, and the suggested activity of a flowchart map for students to work on. All of this I can edit and change or modify to meet the needs of the students that I'm working with. And once it's just right, I'm able to export to Google Docs, Forms, Google Classroom, Microsoft Words, or download as a PDF. I can also translate this resource into over 70 languages or change the reading level. We know teachers might already have content they want to use in their classroom, whether it's chapter books and novels, article links that they use, PDFs, or a vocabulary list. You can start with content you already have, and Diffit will create resources for you. At Diffit for Teachers, we hope to make it easier for you to make high-quality student-ready resources for content you already have or topics you're teaching tomorrow in class. Give us a try and let us know what you think.
All right, so as you could see there, it is a really easy tool to use. It will walk you through the entire process of prompting, and it will generate questions for you. It'll adapt it to the student's reading level, and it'll give you additional activities and ideas for your lesson. So Notebook LM, this is a really incredible tool. And when I first encountered Notebook LM, I was truly blown away with its capabilities. Hold on, sorry, I just want to go back to it. Okay, so Notebook LM, I'm gonna just keep it here just for now. This is a tool that I have used to convert different resources like articles into interactive podcasts. It could turn it into a video. It could turn it into a quiz or a flowchart. I've also used this as my role as a department head to upload K-8 curriculum and the New York State framework, and I've been able to use it to compare and identify any gaps in our K-8 scope and sequence, because you could also upload a ton of different sources, and from that it could do the analysis for you. So I just want to show you Notebook LM for one moment. So over here, I uploaded a source. It was just a website link to an article. And from there, I'm able to convert it in Studio into a ton of different formats. So one thing that you could see here is it'll take the document and it could turn it into a word web over here. And so it'll organize the information really well. So this is an invaluable tool for studying, for students, and it basically just condenses the document and it analyzes it in a visual way. Another format that you could do, it'll take the article and convert it into a video, and so you could see.
You know, when we think about ancient civilizations, our minds usually jump straight to the big stuff, right? Epic battles, all powerful kings, this super powerful high priestess, and get this, the first author in history whose name we
And so it took this article and it converted it into a visual multimodal experience where it has audio in the background and it has visuals on a slides presentation. Another thing that and this may be one of my favorites.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We're digging into your sources today for a surprisingly close look at life, maybe 4,000 years ago.
That's right. We're heading back to ancient Mesopotamia, that whole Fertile Crescent area.
And this is even more incredible when you're able to interact with it. And so if you go into interactive mode over here, it still provides a 2-person podcast, but you're able to also ask it questions. So
welcome back to the deep dive. We're digging into your sources today for a surprisingly close look at life, maybe 4,000 years ago.
That's right. We're heading back to ancient Mesopotamia. Hey, welcome. What's up?
Can you tell us a little bit about where Mesopotamia is located on a map?
Oh, that is a great question.
Absolutely. It helps to ground us.
When we talk about ancient Mesopotamia, we're talking about a very...
And so not only does it become a podcast, it's one that you could also interact with. And so you could bring this up with students, you could show them the podcast, and then you could have them come up and ask it questions and interact with it as well. So this is a really dynamic tool, and it has so many different purposes that you could get into. Another tool, this is the one that I've incorporated most recently. It's called Brisk Teaching. And so this one I use, it's a Google Chrome extension. So I don't know if you could see this. You see this little black circle over here in the corner, the bottom right corner? So this is Brisk. And so it could stay on any website that you're on. And it has a plethora of capabilities here. It could allow you to give feedback, which I use it for, draft an email, create questions, generate an assignment, or there's just so many capabilities that it has attached to it. But the one that I frequently use it for is giving feedback for students. So I'm going to also show you this video of how you can use Brisk to give feedback to students.
With Brisk. So I am in a student essay about Mesopotamia. My 8th grader wrote this, and I'm going to click on the Brisk icon in the bottom right corner in order to give them feedback. And from here, I'll click on the Give Feedback button, and there are 4 powerful ways that I can leave them feedback, some of which will show up in the bottom of my document, and some of which will show up along the sides of the document in the form of Google Comments. So today we're going to show that version of feedback, which is called Targeted. I click on Targeted, and from here I can change a couple of things about the feedback that will post on my students' work. I could leave feedback in a number of languages. Any language I choose does not have to mirror the language of the written essay. If I have particular standards that I would like to align this feedback to, I can select those here. If I would like to upload a rubric and align the feedback to a particular rubric, I click on this button to do that. Like I mentioned, my student is in 8th grade, so that is pre-selected for me. I could specify the focus of my feedback if I'd like to. Otherwise, all I do is click Brisk it. And I am not touching anything. My student's essay is getting highlighted, and feedback is immediately populating into the comments of this Google Doc. And you can see it's really, really fast. Imagine how much time you're able to save when you are grading dozens, if not hundreds of essays over time. What's really great about this is that none of the feedback is posting to my students without my approval. So from here, I could go in, I can modify the feedback, I could edit it in any way that I want, add my own tone of voice, add any sort of personalization. And only when I click comment does my student actually see that feedback posted on their work. As you can see, it looks exactly like it's coming from me because it is. They have no idea that I used Brisk in order to help support my feedback. And Brisk will get you 80% of the way there. We encourage you to add your tone of voice, make it feel personal, make sure you're reading through this feedback so that it feels organic to you and supports your students in the ways that they need. If you don't like any of the feedback, you can just cancel it and it's gone. But this will save you hours of time. Hopefully you can tell that just from this video.
Yeah, so I use Brisk
I excel at helping.
through my Google Classroom. So I'll go straight into Google Classroom, and from there, I'll click that Brisk tool, and I can either give them targeted feedback, and that appears as like comments for students, or I could also create, there are different ways to do it where it either will format it as glows and grows, which is sort of like in bulleted points, and you could just copy and paste that into wherever you put your comments, or it'll insert it as a table directly into that Google Doc that you're working off of. There are three things to keep in mind when using AI in order to use it effectively. Number one, and I sort of alluded to this earlier, is you are the captain, AI is the co-pilot. You need to direct it as to where it should be going. You are ultimately the expert and decision maker in the room. You know your students, your curriculum, and your content best. AI is just a tool to use. It is not a replacement for you. And so when you're using tools like Brisk and you're giving feedback to students, read it over. It may not sound like you, and you may need to adapt it. So for me personally, some of those comments are really long. And so on Brisk, I will ask it to shorten it to 1 to 2 lines. And so I'm giving it constraints, I'm being really specific. And then I also will adjust some of that wording to make it sound more like the language that I use when I'm giving feedback to students. So make sure to review it, edit it, and adapt it to your likes and your needs. Also, prompting is everything. That is like the be all end all. So what the input that you give AI, that is going to be the result that you get. If you are specific and you're giving it clear directions, it will give you clear and specific response. So one thing to remember is using the RFTC formula, and it doesn't have to be exactly that formula, but just trying to be as specific and narrow as possible so you get the results that you're looking for. And the last is to iterate. You want to think of AI like a conversation that you are having, and it is a back and forth discussion. So if AI is not giving you the results that you like, go back in and give it feedback. Make that answer shorter, explain in simpler language, put it in a table or format it in bullet points or a paragraph form. But it is really a process. And the more that you use it, the more comfortable you'll be with using those tools. When I first started, I was using tools that guided me through the process, like Diffit. And eventually, when I became more comfortable, then I went to tools like Gemini or ChatGPT, where I was able to become even more specific and narrow in my response. So I'm going to give you about 7 to 10 minutes. I'll be here in the room. You could test out these tools. I actually want to pop something into the chat where it'll have the links, it'll have the tutorials that I just showed you, and it'll also be giving you some prompts that you can use. This is the document. So I'm going to be sharing this with you. It'll have all the links to all of the tools that I just previewed, describing the function, the resources that I showed you, the 100 ways to use Gemini that I mentioned earlier. And then you could use this prompt cheat sheet to go if you're getting stuck on creating it, or you're welcome to use one of Diffit or Brisk. Brisk, you're going to have to just upload the extension, but you're welcome to try any of these tools now. And yeah, I'm going to give you some time. If you have any questions, you're welcome to pop it into the chat or just ask. All right, so we're going to transition now into the second part of this, which is teaching students how to use AI tools. Or not just AI tools, but also developing AI literacy and critical thinking skills around AI. So before we begin with that, I do want to hear a little bit from you, if maybe you have some knowledge on this already. But think about your students, and what percentage of your students do you think are already using AI tools? Would you say it's less than 10%, between 10 to 20%, 20 to 30 or 40%, or 50% and higher? Personally, what got me inspired to teach AI So I'm teaching 5th grade, and what inspired me to develop an AI literacy course was I was starting to see students using AI tools. And it was just a few, it was trickling in, but I knew it was not their writing. It was just immediately obvious to me. And so I thought, I was like, if students are already using these tools, someone's got to be teaching them about how to be using them and the risks of using these tools. Not just talking about the negatives, but the comprehensive picture of what these tools are and how they work, and both the benefits and the cons of using them. So why teach AI literacy? So if, like I saw already in the chat, students are already using these tools. It is here and it is here to stay. Students are early adopters of these tools. And they're using it every day. Even if they don't realize they're using it, some may be more explicit and are intentionally turning to language models like ChatGPT and Gemini, but others are just using it like with YouTube recommends or Spotify recommendations, and they don't even realize they're using it, but they are. And in order to prepare our students for the future, like we say we are, we need to be able to prepare them with these tools, because using AI and prompt engineering is already a workforce skill that employers are looking for. And so I can only imagine once they enter the workforce, how much more of an impact and how much more value that's going to have once they enter it. And also to mitigate risks around AI. Students may be already using these tools and are sharing private information or personal information. They are probably seeing videos or images that are generated by AI. And so we need to teach them how to detect misinformation when they are experiencing AI tools or AI generated content. So a little bit about my course, and the reason that I chose this was because of my students, and I saw they were using it in the classroom, but this was also my thesis project, so I spent some time developing this there. But this was a course intended for 5th grade students, and I had 2 primary goals. The first was developing their foundational knowledge around AI, so just like my learning objectives are, things considering what AI is, how it works, and then also developing their critical thinking skills. And this was really key, especially in the second half of my course. And so getting them to consider both potential benefits and risks of using generative AI tools and reflecting on how AI may impact the future and their future. So these learning objectives and essential questions were the guiding force for my course. So this is my lesson sequence. And so it took the place of 5 primary lessons. That lesson 5 wasn't really one lesson. It was sort of like multiple lessons and work days dedicated to developing that AI debate. But lesson 1 focused on developing their base foundation. So this was focused on defining what AI is and what it's not. And so we broke down the different characteristics of AI. They played this game, AI or not AI, and they looked at different tools and differentiated what makes Spotify recommends an AI tool versus a machine like a microwave. And then lesson 2 was focused on machine learning. And so we started to think about inputs versus outputs and data sets. And so taking information like someone's age or their music taste, how that influences the recommendations that you get on Spotify, which is like the outputs. So that was breaking down machine learning. Lesson 3 was focused on the ethical use of AI. And so we talked a little bit about AI bias, and we used a tool called QuickDraw to really illustrate this. And QuickDraw it's such a fun tool to use, first of all, but it also really illustrates the point of machine learning by actively, you are the one who is entering data sets by just drawing. So essentially the way it works is you draw something, it says draw a house. And so you draw a house on the screen. And then AI is supposed to guess what is it that you drew. And that's essentially how it works. But it gets the point across of machine learning, but also AI bias, because AI can recognize certain things like a sneaker, but because they have such a large knowledge of what a flat shoe looks like. But when you start to draw something like a heel, which is a less common shoe that is drawn in their data set, it may not be able to identify it. So that is an example of gender bias. And so that's when we started to talk about AI bias and how that influences even in the workplace and applications and all of that. Lesson 4 went into intro to generative AI. And so we spoke about different AIs, one that predicts and one that creates. An AI that predicts is one like YouTube recommendations. So it feeds you the next video. So that is predicting what is the next video that you're going to like. So that fits into that category. Whereas a generative AI tool like what you just used with Gemini or ChatGPT, that could create language, it could create content like videos or audio. And so that's an example of an AI that creates. We also looked at deep fakes. And so they looked at some videos of AI generated videos of like Trump or different political figures talking, and it looks so real, but it's not. And so we were talking about the different benefits and drawbacks of these tools. And then finally, my AI debate. And this was sort of like the culminating project where students debated AI's impact in 4 different realms: AI in the arts and how it'll impact the arts, AI in the environment, AI in education, and AI and work. So those are my students debating. That was one of the debates. That was AI in the arts. And so on one side, they're debating how AI can have a positive impact on the arts, and the other is debating the other end, which is that they believe that is going to have a more negative impact. And so this was sort of like the synthesis of all of our lessons, but it was really instrumental in teaching them critical thinking skills. And so I presented them with both sides of the information, and they were able to develop their own arguments. And you'll see, I'll show you this little clip of them.
Which is our key thing. We think that even though AI art can make little art pieces, all art should be man-made. AI art can take away people's jobs and salaries. AI is not the real art without even leaving attribution, and this is considered plagiarism. Our research shows that AI can take away salaries even when the artist's hard work into their creation. According to exploding topics, some jobs dropped from $33 to $22. With AI art in the world, nothing would be original as AI takes other people's work. Together, let's show what humans are capable of.
All right, so that was just a brief clip of one of the debates showing how students are taking all the knowledge that they've learned from the unit and turning it into a really balanced, nuanced argument and forming their own opinions around AI. So a couple tips just in terms of teaching these, if you are thinking of bringing AI literacy into your classroom, these are some of the takeaways that I had. So one was use hands-on experiments. Google Quick Draw, it was so invaluable in terms of getting these really theoretical concepts come to life and making it concrete for students. And so I would, if I were to do this again, I would also bring in other tools like Teachable Machine, which is essentially building a machine learning AI model. So students upload pictures into Teachable Machine, and that AI, from uploading all those data sets, is able to differentiate between a dog and a cat. And so using those hands-on tools is really helpful in terms of breaking down and making those concepts concrete. The second is leveraging familiar scenarios. So I used examples like Spotify and YouTube recommendations because those were examples that most people are already familiar with and the students were familiar with, or even like TikTok and the next video that comes up. And so that was helpful in bringing them something that was familiar and making it even and more concrete as well. And it helped them also differentiate between AI that predicts and an AI that generates, because they were able to be like, okay, this does this and another does this. And the last is fostering nuance. So it's really important that when you're teaching AI, the purpose of this is not to show them the consequences of using AI and telling them that AI is bad. It's when I was going into this, I really tried my best to bring a balanced view to this course, because students were already coming with a pretty negative view of AI. I surveyed them at the beginning, and almost 80% of them said AI is negative and it's going to negatively impact society. And by the end of the course, they were presented with both sides of the scale and both perspectives, and were able to come out with a more nuanced, balanced perspective, and build their critical thinking skills. And that was really the primary purpose of this. And the other tip that I didn't include in this is actually sharing ethical dilemmas with them. So you could use as a hook for class, presenting some type of ethical dilemma of like, if there is an AI driving car and the AI car gets into a car accident, whose fault is it? Is it the responsibility of the AI car model? Is it the responsibility of the user? So getting them to also just continue to think about how AI is impacting our society and building those critical thinking skills. So that is all from me. Thank you all for listening. I know I was supposed to leave some time at the end, so I'm sorry for going a little over. But if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them and stay on. If you need to go, I totally understand. So thank you all for.
I also want to add my voice and say thank you so much, Naomi. Oh, somebody has a question.
Yeah, Rachel, so that lesson plan is actually in what I shared, that document that I shared earlier. You should be able to access the entire arc and sequence in there. But also there's so many great lesson platforms out there. Common Sense Education is one that I used to make my lessons, and also Day of AI was really helpful, but all my lessons are in there along with the resources that I used as well. Oh, and I know there was a question earlier that I got. Which AI tool could help need-based students? I would say really there are certain tools that are catered to that specific demographic of students. But I would say using any tool like Diffit or Gemini and being able to differentiate tools or create questions on a certain level, any AI tools can do that as long as you are feeding it the information that you need. But there certainly are ones that are catered to that specific need.
Just in case, this is a classic example of who you can be in the future, or who someone that you know can be in the future. Naomi went through the program. She works in the field, and she's now able to share valuable insights with you based on her in-person experiences that she was able to incorporate in her learning, that she was able to incorporate into her learning. So really and truly, we want to say thank you so much. Please don't hesitate to follow up with us if you have any questions regarding enrolling in a program or someone that you know. And as I said, Naomi, the program that you enrolled in, somebody said that it was.
I was in the instructional technology program. It was called educational technology or instructional technology. It was kind of like a dual.
Yes. So
program.
I have a question about, yes, Cairo, what's your specific question?
Hi, so I think you kind of started to answer a little bit. So I wanted to know if there was a difference between the ed tech route and the instructional tech route, because I am looking to apply. I just don't know which one to choose. I'm a teacher now and I've been teaching for 7 years. I'm thinking about what's next. So I'm kind of deciding between which program. So I kind of wanted to pick anyone's brain, or especially Naomi's, because I know that's what she's going for right now. And she's graduating soon. So I wanted to know what's the difference? What made you pick instructional technology over ed tech or something, if they're the same thing or something?
Yeah, so I was actually between those two. It's essentially most of the foundational courses are the same, and towards the end it branches out into two different tracks. I ended up graduating with the educational technology one. The only reason that I did that was primarily because I wanted to get my professional certificate, because I'm a teacher, and I went into the program with only my initial certificate that I got from my undergraduate program. And in order to get my master's, in order to get the professional certificate, I needed my master's. And with the educational technology program, you're able to do that, but with the instructional technology, you're not. Most of the courses are the same. There's like where it branches out, I would say, is the electives and then that thesis.
Okay.
So the thesis project for, at least for the educational technology program, because that's what I did, was what I just showed you of that AI literacy course. There's really like, you could kind of choose any topic. And from there, I don't remember exactly what happened after that. I just presented my thesis presentation. I did that. I had to document it, and then I wrote a thesis paper on that. But I'm not 100% sure what the instructional technology thesis project is.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yes, so the instructional
Just-
technology program, I guess I could add in terms of like just the application requirement, but if you want in-depth like advice, I could set you up with the program director or one of the professors to actually help you work through it. Looking forward to seeing everyone a part of our family in the future.